Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
It's the first time I tried to make an intro.
Yeah. Did you ask Steven Tyler to record that just for us?
No, but I might have been able to. I have met him. You didn't know that, did you?
No.
I worked 3 concerts for him back in the 70s.
Okay. Well,
I'm an old hippie. Y'all just don't believe it.
Yeah. Maybe we can track him down and see if get Steven and Joe Perry to come on and talk about those concerts where you were a roadie for them.
Well, they probably wouldn't even remember me. Come on now. we got a good show tonight, I think, don't we?
Oh yeah,
I think it's going to be rather interesting. It's right along the lines of ancient history, and it's as far back in ancient history as we can go, isn't it?
Oh yes, it is. And let me do the intro. Yeah, tonight's guest is Alex Teplish. He's a Zecharia Sitchin scholar, author of In the Beginning, the Epic of the Anunnaki, and Alex is a UFO researcher. Welcome, Alex. How you doing tonight? Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I had a pretty good weekend, and happy to be on the show.
Oh, good. Yeah. It's like I've been really looking forward to this for the last few days. If people enjoy like Reverend Michael Carter's discussions and Ancient Aliens and how they look at the connection of UFOs and religion, this is a show for you. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for the next 2 hours.
Looking forward to it.
All right. So,
well, I'm not. I don't want to be a skeptic, but I don't believe a whole bunch that Sitchin said. I think he had a lot of great ideas and a lot of thought-provoking statements, but I see a lot that he didn't really. He assumed a lot. How's that?
Well, I definitely think that any researcher or author of books, especially when studying such a topic as ancient history, that's been lost through thousands of years. Mm-hmm. There's always some speculation involved, and I always like to say that I never like to subscribe and say that I believe this is my belief system, or I have faith that this is the truth and the absolute truth. I'm always open to alternative theories. I continue to research the subject. I know earlier you said I'm a Zecharia Sitchin scholar. I have read all his books, and I do support a big portion of his theory, but at the same time, I'm always open to finding faults in the theory and opposing
I'm
theories.
not trying to put you on the spot here now.
Oh, no, not at all.
Because a lot of what he says I agree with, but there's pieces that I don't. I myself, I believe what we call in the Anunnaki are a race of people who were here before us.
Okay, yeah.
And not, I mean, that's just my take on it is all. But my mind, like you said, your belief system isn't firm. I have a belief system. I have an opinion system.
Right, exactly.
And it seems as though that's what you have too.
Right. I have an opinion system. I also have basically a system of continuous research, figuring out what sounds plausible, and updating my own opinion system. So it's a constant feedback loop.
Cool. I find that good. I'm sorry, Mark. You know me. I'll derail you every time.
No problem. Yeah, Alex. When and where did the Anunnaki land? Maybe we could start there and just start going for the next hour and 50 minutes.
Right. So where exactly they landed first is not something that has been discovered, but there are theories that some of these giant stone platforms that have been found in the Middle East may have been part of their landing platform. but it is known that, the Middle East, or Iraq specifically, where present-day Iraq is the cradle of civilization, that general area is where the first written civilizations existed, or at least the ones we've discovered, and they are the first ones to talk about the Anunnaki. That does not mean that there weren't other civilizations existing in other parts of the world, in other parts of Africa. But this is basically the first known to man that spawned off an intelligent and written civilization that recorded their history.
Do you think that where King Solomon's temple is, it possibly could have been one of their landing pads? Because there's some pretty big stones there.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, they may have been landing all over the earth in the prior ages. Which goes into one of the theories of the yugas, or the cycles that the Earth goes through.
Well, we know that everybody has. We found elongated skulls all over the world, and do you think possibly that they were the Anunnaki?
They may have been the Anunnaki. They may have been the hybrids between the Anunnaki and humanity. They may have been another species that either evolved or was created by the Anunnaki that lived in those times. And it's been said that by many different ancient civilizations, starting with the Vedic civilization, the Hopis, that we've gone through several different cycles, several different eras and worlds.
You're speaking of the Kali Yuga, right?
The Yugas, yes, exactly.
Yugas.
And the Yugas, we've been basically our cycles on Earth, where there's destruction and rebirth. And we're said to be in the fourth world right now of humanity, eventually entering in the fifth. So during these prior ages, there were potentially other types of humans that inhabited planet Earth, had their own technologies and their own civilization, only to die out, and then the survivors would pick up the pieces and start all over again.
See, that's what I was, in my opinion, I think that's what the Anunnaki were, was the last of the last civilization. Of course, if you're driving around in a car and all the other people only can walk and know nothing about a car, they would consider you a god.
Right, exactly. And that's actually been repeated in recent history, something called the cargo cults.
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting story there. Now, I'm sure most of our listeners have heard it before. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry. I find this interesting.
Oh yeah, I do too. Could Atlantis be prior to the Anunnaki landing in the Middle East?
Right. So Atlantis could be basically a landmass or a city that existed prior to the last shift in ages, that existed prior to all that, and was inhabited by an advanced civilization that was in their own peak of technology, of development, and unfortunately they were not able to continue their civilization past that point once the calamities began to strike on Earth. So whoever the survivors were spread around the world and started all over again.
Okay, and in your book, in the beginning, you do cover some of the ideas that Noah's Ark could have been one of those what do you call it, like genetic storehouses.
Right. Well, in my book, I tie the stories. I basically connect the storyline between the Anunnaki and the Book of Genesis, which is from the Old Testament, and the Noah's Ark story is basically, practically everybody would admit that it's impossible to gather two of every species on this planet onto any size ship. But that doesn't mean that Noah and his family survived the flood with their own farm animals or whatever animals they were particularly tending to during that time. So they could have definitely kept a small barn of animals for their own necessities while they were on this ark, and then once the flood subsided, they were able to start all over again using these farm animals.
Okay. Do you think that the Mount Ararat anomaly could be the remains of the Ark?
It could be. I mean, there's definitely some anomalies that have been found with satellite pictures and so on, and
it is strange.
Yeah, there's some that believe that mountain is in Turkey. Some that believe that it's in Armenia, but it's pretty much in that general area where of the world where the floods subsided, and then supposedly Noah and his family emerged and began civilization.
Okay. We have. I've seen some of these. Documentaries on YouTube. Talk about. Adam's rib was one of the first examples of genetic engineering. Is that a possibility?
Right. So, if the Anunnaki wanted to, basically, they were perfecting mankind. They were creating the first goal of theirs was to create a worker being, someone that would be docile, listen to commands, but smart enough to understand their commands and go off with those commands. So, my theory is that the Anunnaki began developing something a lot different than what eventually emerged from their scientific studies. They did not intend necessarily to create an intelligent being like modern humans are today. They started out with another type of species, or another type of human species, where would do all the work and depend on them for food and shelter. And then gradually, as they were experimenting with the genetics, they created modern man. And once they realized that what they had created, they began to take on those genetics and improve on them. And that was basically the first people, the first modern people.
Okay. So are we at the point where Sitchin wrote about people were engineered to be the workers in the gold mines?
Right. So Sitchin speculated that the workers were in the gold mines, but even taking a step away from what Sitchin wrote and just looking at the way the Sumerians described the Anunnaki and themselves, there are other translators who have all translated that the gods, in plural, were rebelling against their leaders. They did not want to toil and do the work, whatever that work was, whether it was restarting agriculture, developing the land that they needed to develop, or mining in the mines. The texts describe that they rebelled and no longer wanted to toil, and the solution for that was to fashion or create mankind. So that's the translation. Whether it's gold, whether they're from another planet or from another age, the translation still comes out to being that the Anunnaki created mankind in this prior age.
Oh, that's cool. Alex, have you been to the Middle East or seen some of these tablets that might be in a museum, or I'm sure you've seen a lot of them in research books? How did you go about putting all this information together?
Right. Well, I actually have not been to the Middle East. I would love to go, and it's definitely on my plans to go there someday soon. But luckily, I do live in New York City, where we have many museums, including one in Brooklyn that has a large collection of these ancient artifacts from the Sumerians, Babylonians, Akkadians. So they're definitely accessible. right in a major city like New York. But I have read many of the books written by Zechariah Sitchin, Eric von Daniken, and other authors on the subject. Looked at their photos. I've done my own research online. Even mainstream archaeology continues to find all types of ruins that were dedicated to these Anunnaki, to the gods, not just in ancient Iraq, but they recently found temples that were dedicated to Lord Enki, which is one of the Anunnaki gods, in Bahrain. So they are finding more and more of these, and the fact that there's so much turmoil and war going on in that area prevents a lot of this archaeological search. So, they've only begun to uncover this ancient civilization in present-day Iraq. I think there's about 40,000 known other sites that still have yet to be dug up and explored.
See now, them creating us to mine gold kind of hits me as something that doesn't seem right. If there were an all-powerful race of people coming from the stars, wouldn't they be able to create their own gold?
Well,
that just kind of it's kind of weird.
The way I see it, and the way that it's been explained in these books, is that the Anunnaki weren't necessarily all-powerful or coming from the stars. The theory is that they came from Nibiru, which is part of our own solar system, potentially orbiting a brown dwarf, which is part of our binary system, and which is they would basically come here using slightly more advanced technology than what we have now, and they only had a certain window of opportunity when, like they say, the stars would align or the planets would align a certain way, and that's when they would have their window of opportunity to come here or travel between the planets. Once that window of opportunity would close, they would not have access to our planet, and that's potentially why they've disappeared all these thousands of years, why they've no longer been in sight or in control, or at least in the knowledge of humanity. But as far as the gold is concerned, every ancient civilization treasured it, used it for all types of rituals, sculptures. And they would both, and they were dedicated to the gods as well. Yeah. So there's also a lot of research that gold is useful in many other things. For example, it's shown promise in cancer therapy. They actually found medieval churches that had gold plating on their windows, on their stained glass windows, and the sunlight would release some of these particles into the air, and it would actually purify the air.
I've heard that one before.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that one's a new one on me.
Yeah, so there's a lot of uses for gold, and it's definitely something that's a plausible theory. They've found ancient mines all over Africa, gold mines. So there's definitely something there. I'm not saying that that's again, I don't like to say that it's the absolute truth, but it's a definite possibility.
Right.
There is the Ancient Aliens episode where they did comment about mining under the serpent mounds, but you can also walk around and find pieces.
Now, I'm not saying that they didn't mine for gold. Now, that wasn't my purpose in the question. It was if they were that advanced and able to cross space, or whatever, that they should be able to actually make gold. We're real close to that right now ourselves.
We could say that we've crossed space, we've traveled to the moon, and we've sent satellites to other planets, including Mars, and we're still using gold. We're still mining gold to this day. We've yet to figure out how to convert elements directly into gold and usable gold. Right.
Oh, I was it just hit me as funny as what I was getting at,
Yeah.
No, I was just saying that around the serpent mound, people can find parts of the meteorite that crashed into the area on which the Serpent Mound was built. They're just kind of scattered all over the place. So that's another sample of how ancient cultures did use minerals, and they did incorporate some of the meteorite into pendants and armor for some of the Adena and Hopewell burials. So I just want to throw that out there, that there's a long history of using minerals as part of rituals.
So Sitchin says this Nibiru or whatever it is coming back, but it isn't coming back for years yet, right?
Well, actually, I think he did a calculation in one of his books, and he calculated it to be definitely most likely not within our lifetimes, unless our lifetimes are extended past the average rate right now. But there's so many different theories, and nobody knows for sure. There is astronomical proof and studies into us being part of a binary system or a larger body orbiting on the outskirts of our solar system, and there's a lot of astronomical evidence to support that. Now, they haven't found it yet, but there are plenty of astronomers that feel that it will one day be found, and it's just that our equipment isn't sensitive enough to detect it yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt we're a binary system. If we weren't, we'd be unusual in the universe, because most systems are a binary system of some type.
Right. And in fact, the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, they knew about a distant binary system. They understood the inner mechanics of a binary system spinning through our skies 93 light years away, more than 3,200 years ago. They made specific calculations that helped support a scientific line of inquiry, which only just emerged a few years ago. This particular star or binary star, it's called Algol, was also known as the Demon Star in the constellation Perseus, and it was only discovered in 1783, while they were already studying this in ancient Egypt. In addition to that, the Dagon tribe knew about Sirius and its two companion stars. They described deities that arrived from the sky in their fantastic skyship. And that's where the extraterrestrial theories come from, because many of these ancient civilizations talk about skyships or boats in the sky, or beings coming down on ladders from the sky. So there is some evidence to support that there was an extraterrestrial influence in the distant past. And so the Dagon tribe, they knew about the brightest star in the sky, Sirius, and having its two companion stars. And they also knew that the orbit cycle takes 50 years. And they had a lot of knowledge that was only discovered using astronomical tools that they didn't have in their possessions.
Yeah, Alex, since you just brought up the Dogon, have you read Robert Temple's book, The Sirius Mystery?
No, I haven't read. I'm referring to Robert Temple and his book, but I haven't read the whole book. I've read some excerpts and some of the things he's brought out about them.
Yeah, I've done that too. But what you were talking about with the Dogon, and they're the ones that developed the like artwork that depicted the like fish-like beings.
Right, exactly. They called them the Nomo.
Nomo. Okay, that's it. Yeah.
You mean they had scales and could have been reptilians?
It's possible, or it's possible that they had some kind of
suit.
You
never know.
Or it could be a protective suit that protects them from our environment or space.
Yeah, I think it was in Temple's book that he wrote about. That's why the Pope's hat has kind of like a fish
Right,
look to it because there's a ET religious connection, and the popes are just carrying that on. Does that sound like a real possibility?
Yeah, and in fact, I think then that same hat is part of the ancient Babylonian culture as well. I think they've depicted it as well. So it's something that has repeated in several different civilizations.
Also, so that idea spread out from the
not
Dogon people?
Yeah, not necessarily from them. It could have happened independently.
Right.
Okay, that's true too. Okay.
It could be independent, or the Dogon could have learned it from some more ancient tribe that they've encountered, or they may have seen it on their own, their ancestors.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's really neat.
Now your book,
in the beginning.
Yeah, in the beginning, the book is a graphic novel, right?
Right. So yeah, it's basically a graphic novel is similar to a comic book, but it's an extended version. It has a lot more reading, and it's usually targeted towards a more mature audience, not necessarily for children. And the reason I chose that format is I actually originally wrote this story as a screenplay for a movie. And while I didn't have the connections in the entertainment industry, and I really felt that this movie would need a very high budget, graphic novel was more in my grasp and my reach. So I basically hired the artists from around the world to produce the artwork. I put together the whole book, and I put all these nonfiction books, the theories from the nonfiction books, into a storyline, so people can easily follow it and relate to it by hearing the stories from the Book of Genesis from an extraterrestrial point of view.
That sounds good. I'm going to look into it personally. I like I said, I just known about you from the catching the one interview you done with what is it, Energy Radio, Mark?
Yep. Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise,
who we've talked to before, and I thought it was an awesome interview, and I thought we'd Mark mentioned your name, and I jumped at the chance because the subject's not one we normally cover. The Nephilim isn't something we normally cover, is it, Mark? We usually stick with American history, ancient history.
Yeah, that's right, but yeah, we're diverse.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean. And I just thought it was kind of interesting. We do have several hosts that cover it quite extensively, as a matter of fact. And but I've never really indulged much into it. Now, I have checked into the Sumerian tablets, actual translations of them, and I find some of the stories strikingly similar to what's in the Bible. And they're way older than anything that's in the Bible, or you know what I mean, than when the Bible was put together. And it's the first known writing that mankind has made. And usually when the first thing you write down is not your myths. You actually write down history.
Right, exactly. In fact, there was a school of thought in the 18th, 19th century, way before the ancient astronaut theories came out, before Zechariah Sitchin was born or any of that. The school of thought was called Pan-Babylonianism, and that's where these studies consider the Hebrew Bible and Judaism, a lot of these stories, as directly derived from Mesopotamian Babylonian mythology. So they found parallels that were impossible to deny to the Book of Genesis.
You pretty much only have to change their names.
Right. Yeah, especially the flood story. I mean, that flood story has been told by pretty much every ancient civilization on this planet.
So, if all these worldwide cultures have the same story, is that proof that it happened? Considering that there was a lack of cell phones and VCRs and all that stuff.
I mean, I would say that if you find the commonalities of what the ancient civilizations talk about, then you're approaching a lot closer to the truth than when you find civilizations warring or fighting over what the truth is. When you find the commonalities in being a good person, then you know that that's the right way to live. And the same way that you find the commonalities with the stories that they talk about. If they're all mentioning a flood from all over the world, then there must be some validity to it. Something huge took place that has been passed down through myths and legends ever since. And many people believe that this great flood was a result of the end of the last ice age, when most of the Earth's ice began to melt and sea levels began to rise, and entire continents began to be reshaped by the water.
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting classes I had when I was in school was a folklore. It was like an Appalachian folklore class, and it was like one of those optional classes. And I thought, this could be kind of interesting. And I really did enjoy the class. There's not a whole lot of places to use it, and once Thomas and I started working together, we started talking. It seems like it comes up almost on a weekly basis. It's like it's really interesting how much folklore really is rooted in the truth.
Right. It's basically people trying to explain what they don't quite understand, or stories that have been passed down over thousands of years that have changed from culture to culture, as well as groups of people who didn't quite have the technology or the vocabulary to explain certain things, so they would use the words that they knew and relate it to things that they could describe.
Yeah, and Alex, when you look at some of the hieroglyphs on the just Karnak or inside the Great Pyramid, you do have these much taller figures than the other human-looking characters in the hieroglyphs. Were the carvers of those hieroglyphs, depicting these giant figures as the Anunnaki?
Right. Well, the Sumerians depicted the Anunnaki larger, the gods that they called them the gods larger than themselves. Along with, like you mentioned, the ancient Egyptians depicted the gods as being larger, and many other ancient civilizations. In fact, in the Vedic society, they believe that in one of the previous ages, that the beings that existed on this planet were all larger and had longer lifespans, and that longer lifespan is something that has been mentioned in the Bible, has been mentioned by the Vedas, as well as the Sumerians. The Sumerians had something called the King's List, and in that King's List, they kept a very detailed record of various kings, and they even they draw the line where the flood happened. And after that flood, that's when the lifespans began to diminish and began to be closer to what we know of today. But prior to the flood, they depict and they write about various kings that ruled, and for tens of thousands of years. Yep.
That's something else. You think so? The deluge or the flood actually affected our DNA in some way, then?
Right. Or the previous species that inhabited Earth mostly died out, and the ones that were left over potentially mixed with other species and began to absorb their lifespans.
Oh, we know there's been giants, throughout history. Me and Mark have
we've covered
checked
that
out a
pretty.
lot of stuff about giants, and they are everywhere. They're not just in one particular area. They were all over the world.
Right, right.
But these hieroglyphs were focusing on real giant people instead of just depicting them as being larger than the normal population, just because that they were significant people. They were really physically much larger.
Right. I mean, not only did they depict these gods as being physically larger, some of the more ancient ruins have larger doorways. The stones used were much larger, and the proportions are larger. So it just shows that a larger species of being inhabited the planet. Now, if a major flood buried half the civilized world at the time, then a lot of that evidence is still underwater or underground.
Yeah, just in the Mediterranean Sea, they've discovered over 500 sunken cities.
Well,
that's quite a few.
Yeah,
That's just there.
Exactly, and those are the ones that maybe are visible underwater. There's
it's
probably
not real deep there, and they can, it's easy to get to. It's
right.
Not like off of Cuba, where it's a mile and a half down. They've discovered pyramids.
So, Alex, do you find that a lot of the information in the Bible was actually true?
Well, I can't say that it's true or the way that it's been written about is true, but there are many parallels from the Bible to the more ancient Sumerian stories. Mm-hmm. I can give you some examples. In the Atrahasis, they talk about the beginning of the universe being shapeless, and there's nothing but water. They have 6 generations of gods created one after the other, each associated with something such as sky or earth, and this parallels with the 6 days of creation in Genesis. The 6th generation god consults with the other gods and decides to make mankind as servants so that the gods can rest, which leads to the 7th day of rest. In both tales, in both the Sumerian and the Bible, they talk about a plant that can bestow immortality, and a snake that prevents or a reptile that prevents the characters from gaining that immortality. There's the first mythical man. They called him Adapa, while the Bible calls him Adam. And then there's many others, and that all traces back to this school of thought called Pan-Babylonianism.
Wow.
Well, and see, in the Greek mythology, the Titans could have been giants.
Right. Well, my theory is that all these ancient civilizations that talked about various pantheon of gods were all talking about the same group, just different times, different interactions, and they all had different stories, slightly different stories.
It even goes as far north as the Norse mythology. It's character for character, just change name.
Right, exactly. And some of these stories may have been passed down from one civilization to the next, and as each civilization took on these stories, they changed them or they injected their own culture into it.
So, do you find any differences between Mr. Sitchin and Mr. Von Daniken, or are they pretty consistent with their beliefs? They just present the information in a little different manner.
I think that Von Daniken, he kind of keeps it very loose, all the pieces, and just identifies the various anomalies. He doesn't go as much in depth about the Anunnaki, while he also doesn't really go into depth about the gold mining, like Thomas mentioned earlier. Sitchin really concentrates on that gold mining and the purpose of it. Sitchin also analyzes the connections between the Sumerian stories and the planets and Nibiru, while Van Daniken doesn't really mention Nibiru that much. So I think that's where the differences are. Sitchin really goes into detail trying to translate the Sumerian texts, while Van Daniken studies a bigger variety of things in hieroglyphics and structures and so on.
He was more a generalist.
Exactly.
See, that's kind of what I try not to do. Well, it's when you don't know every single detail, you can make a bigger picture, if you know what I mean.
Right.
On some subjects, and that's what I try to do. I can't remember the names of half the sites, or you know what I mean, but I know what they're about. We got sites all over the world that are way older than what they say. Gobo Tempe is one of them, and you talk a little bit about that on that interview I heard.
Right. In Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, is a site that was recently found, and it's a circular. They call it a temple, but they really don't know what the purpose of it was. And when they dig deeper, they find another structure below it, and I think it goes 3 levels deep. And these structures were intentionally buried, and they say that it's traced back to 12,000 years ago, which is older than any known civilization to man, and older than any history that we have, any ancient history. So it just shows that there are still layers beneath layers on this planet that are yet to be discovered and studied to its fullest extreme.
So the Sumerians could actually got their culture from an even older culture.
Right, definitely.
Or their mythology, I should say, or their history, according to them, of course.
Right. Well, the Sumerians do specify that they were taught their knowledge by the Anunnaki, that the Anunnaki passed down their much of their knowledge to them. The Sumerians were meticulous record keepers. They kept everything from their history, the King's List, like I mentioned, their accounting records on a daily basis, business records. So they didn't keep it on paper like we do or in computers, but they used cuneiform and kept it on these clay tablets. And they had libraries of this information. And the most famous stories ended up in the Bible. So they may have been told certain things or taught certain knowledge, like math and astronomy, while other things they weren't taught, and they had to just make the best of it and kind of come to their own conclusions.
Yes, some of those, like what we were saying earlier about the hieroglyphs. You get the Anunnaki, maybe looking up or at least facing a circle in the sky. It doesn't necessarily always look like the sun. It just seems like the Anunnaki are just getting their knowledge from somewhere, or it's being passed from the sky to the interpreters, religious leaders of the day, and it goes out, across the culture. It's just, these are how old are these tablets? Like 5,000 years old?
Yeah, something like that. 5,000.
It just seems like there's such an obvious connection when you look at it. Like, how do you misinterpret that? It's right there.
Right. And I mean, it's considering how much detail they kept of their records. And one moment they're in full seriousness about their lives and their daily events, and the next moment they're talking about kings that had lifespans of tens of thousands of years, or worshiping one god over another in the Anunnaki pantheon, or building temples to honor them and bringing them meat, bringing them food. And basically, worshiping meant bringing them, basically helping them live and supporting them.
So these tablets are that detailed?
Yes, yes.
It's almost like a diary, day-to-day diary.
In some cases, they have found day-to-day diaries or accounting records of business transactions and laws and um, many of these things and mathematical calculations, and a big portion of what the knowledge they have is still being used today and has been passed down from that ancient civilization.
Okay, I know Eric writes a lot about the Nazca lines. Did Sitchin write about a Nazca too? Was there any kind of connection, possible connection?
Yeah, he did write about them. I believe he said that they were possibly created by man, but to represent their what they saw, or to basically be identified from a high vantage point from the sky. So if you're in an airplane or some kind of ship, sky ship, then you would be able to see these things and immediately identify that intelligent beings live there.
Yeah, Giorgio did a show on Nazca this past Friday night, and yeah, just I don't know how you could misidentify what the culture was saying from the air. It's right there in front of you. Yeah, you can't see it from, really can't make out parts of it from the earth, but you have to be in the sky, and it's just like so obvious that there had to be people who had the ability to fly a long time ago.
Right, and the Vedas talk about them. They call them Vimanas. They talk about them in a lot of detail, about these flying ships that the gods controlled. They also talk about the wars that took place in the sky, and they describe these wars, or the weapons that were used, that sound a lot like atomic bombs, and the reaction that people had also sound like radiation poisoning.
Yeah. So when were those Indian Veda texts written?
Well, there's debates on that too. They also talk. They mention that they were written somewhere around 4,000 years ago, something like that. But they talk that the way that they describe them in the texts, the timeline goes way further, much further back. So those stories were passed down for thousands of years. But how far back they go, nobody really knows exactly.
Oh, so they may be at minimum contemporary with the Sumerian text, but they could precede the Sumerian text by a couple thousand years.
I believe that they were written, at least the ones that have been found were written after the Sumerians. The Sumerians would have been the first to write this down, but they do describe similar happenings, and they do describe a lot of technology, probably a lot more than the Sumerians did.
Wow.
Okay. Well, they even mentioned Krishna's city, and it's underwater. They've recently found it, they believe, and that probably predated the deluge. I can't say it, but the flood, or they thinking that it predated the flood, or it could have been one of them wars that the texts describe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was.
And I believe that was like 5,000 to 6,000 years old, if I remember right.
It could be even older than that.
Well, that was the estimate. I have no clue. I don't think our dating system is right. I believe these texts from the Sumerians could be twice as old as what they think they are.
Yeah, well, they say that it could date back to 8 to 12,000 years.
So,
which goes back to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey.
Right,
same
and it
time
also
frame.
goes back to the last time, the end of the Ice Age.
Right, or even during the Ice Age. I mean, there were still parts of the world that were habitable and not necessarily frozen.
We got about 4 minutes for the break there, Mark. You got something you can ask him real quick?
Okay.
And he needs to tell his website out before the break so we don't forget it.
Okay.
Sure. So I'll just repeat the book. The name of the book is In the Beginning, The Epic of the Anunnaki. It's sold on the website, inthebeginningthebook.com. You can also search for it on Amazon. Just search for In the Beginning, The Epic of the Anunnaki on Amazon.com, and you could find it there. In addition to that, I have a Facebook page, facebook.com/inthebeginningthebook, where I, aside from providing sneak peeks into the graphic novel, I also share a lot of research, articles, mainstream archaeology and science related to the subject, and theories as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think Thomas has been putting it in the chat room.
Oh, yeah. Well, not the Facebook page, but the other one I have, definitely.
Yeah. Alex, has your research led to any Men in Black encounters?
They haven't come after you.
To be honest with you, there was one particular situation where right after I launched the book, I had a call from the FBI, and they told me that there was some virus going around. They actually paid me a visit and spoke to me, but it was a very suspicious situation. But it never really went anywhere, and all they told me about was some virus that was being passed around to computers, and my computer may have been infected. I don't know. They came out to see me, and it didn't make sense, but it never really went anywhere from there. So I don't like to talk about it just in case.
Well, when there's a knock on the door and they say it's the government and we're here to help, don't answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we suddenly disappear from the airwaves, you know they're listening in too. Yeah, let's see what.
Got about 2 minutes.
Okay, let's see what else is there.
Go ahead.
Okay, I know Mr. Sitchin wrote about horned figures, represented the gods. We do have some of that in the Native American petroglyphs. We covered that a little bit last week. Does that sound like it's holding up over time?
I think that the horns were representative of the gods or of the leadership that they may have had on their helmets. It has been depicted in the Babylonian times as well, and there's several different ancient civilizations that have depicted the gods with or kings with these horned helmets.
I also think your mute's on.
It darn sure was, man, and you wouldn't believe the spiel I just put out there too. Boy, I got to go through it all again. Feel dumb.
Yeah, it's the boss's requirements.
I hear that. Well, it's not a requirement. It's really an honor to be part of all this. And the only way we can continue to have shows like this is if you chip a buck or two in once in a while. And with as many listeners as we have out there, if everybody kicked in $2, we could run this place for, probably 2 years, if not longer. So hit that donation button for us. We'd sure appreciate it. Mark, I'll let you get back to it because I really need to go untie my tongue now after that.
Okay. Alex, did Mr. Sitchin write anything about underground bases? We do have that theme that does come up a little bit in Middle Eastern mythology and other places around the world. Does he have that in his books?
I didn't really encounter that much of underground bases. There is talk of certain Anunnaki ruling the underworld. So that may have been a reference to something underground. There's also, like we mentioned earlier, various civilizations talking about beings living underwater. So they may have had some underwater ships or bases. And there's even a I've seen a Sumerian or a engraving from back then where they show people swimming underwater, breathing through what looks like almost like primitive scuba gear, but using like animal hides and so on. So there's definitely some talks of and some descriptions of them coming out of the water.
Cool. Okay, so there's the possibility of USOs involved with Anunnaki studies.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Cool. I think it was about a year ago when we had John Ventry on. He said, there really aren't any USOs sightings coming out of the rivers around Pittsburgh, but when you get into the Great Lakes area, there are some examples in the literature. So that's interesting. It's becoming a worldwide phenomenon. Okay.
Well, I got a question for you that kind of follows along that line there of the submerged objects. What's your take on the hollow Earth theory?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit more far-fetched for me to believe, especially the Earth being hollow. I mean, it's possible that there are large areas that are undiscovered but are beneath the ground, beneath the observable ground, and that there maybe have been some civilizations living there at the time. But for the whole entire Earth to be hollow, I have a hard time believing that. I mean, it just doesn't line up with scientific theories and research that's been out.
Yeah, I kind of come to the same conclusion myself. I was just curious because of some people think that that's where unidentified flying objects come from.
Well, if there are underground bases or bases underwater, deep underwater, then I can see how a primitive culture might interpret it as the Earth being hollow, and kind of misinterpret certain things that they saw.
I'm sorry I derailed you again, Mark.
No problem. We have plenty of time. Okay.
You know me, I get a thought, I got to bring it out.
No, go ahead. I have plenty of questions. Alex, what? One of the questions I have is, before the Anunnaki arrived, were most religions or a belief system that incorporated some kind of afterlife? Were those like very early cultures more egalitarian, where there really wasn't a prominent religious leader, and once the Anunnaki appeared, that's where we had the introduction of some of the elite ruling classes?
Well, nobody really knows what existed before then, because that's as far back as we can go with the ancient writings. They say that the Anunnaki were the ones who passed down kingship from the gods to humanity. So prior to their arrival, or whether they were a previous age or extraterrestrials, there's really no writings. There's nothing recorded, at least that we've discovered to this point, that describe an egalitarian society or any other type of structure. As far as I know, it started off with kingships and these rulers, and only recently has turned into more of the governments and the various types of governments that we've known throughout history.
Do you think the same bunch is behind it?
In my book, I actually depict how majority of the Anunnaki did leave at a certain point during their window of opportunity, while others remained on Earth. And that's where they diverged in their development. And the ones that left may have joined in their own ascension or revolution on their own planet, while the ones that stayed basically tried to rule from the shadows and control humanity to this day.
Okay.
And it does make you go, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Alex said he'd take a couple of calls, so if somebody would like to call in, the number's 347-688-2902. And I've had one earlier and I didn't answer it. That's why I asked. So call back and I'll accept it this time. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Let's see. How does Nibiru fit into? It seems like Sitchin has that planet in a lot of his works. What can we expect in the future? I know we touched on a little bit earlier about it's.
Wasn't it called the Planet of the Crossing by the Sumerians and not
right.
Nibiru?
Well, that's the translation, the Planet of the Crossing, and
I don't know. I just heard it both ways. And
one of the most amazing things about what Sitchin wrote was he published his first book in 1976, I believe, and there he describes how the Earth was formed and how our moon was formed, and how the moon was actually the Earth was a larger body, a larger planet called Tiamat in a different part of the solar system, in a different orbit. And during this great collision 4 billion years ago between Nibiru and Tiamat, the main body that was remaining coalesced into Earth, with the waters filling in the gaps, the giant craters that were created, and another large piece that was broken off was eventually formed into our moon. So this is something that he theorized in his books based on his own translations from Sumerian texts, and then later it was only proven or theorized by scientists and astronomers that indeed there was a great collision with a large body with Earth. And that's the mainstream theory to this day. That's the mainstream theory that's how Earth was formed and how the moon was created.
Okay. Out of Mr. Sitchin's long list of book titles, which one do you think best reflects his theories? Which one appeals to you the most?
Mm-hmm. So I would say there's two. One of them is called Genesis Revisited, and I think he does a good job in summing a lot of his various books and theories up in that particular book. And then the other one is the 12th Planet, and I think the 12th Planet was his first book that he came out with. Those two really do a good job. I mean, in other books he goes a little bit more in depth with specific civilizations or parts of the world, but those two really sum up the story well. He later published a book, The Lost Book of Enki, and that's where he took a lot of the translations and he published it as a fictional work, but based on his own translations and pieced in.
That one there I have read.
Right, and the graphic novel that I've put together is basically it's an inspired work based on Sitchin's writings, based on many other theorists and their nonfiction work, and it takes all these nonfiction theories and puts them together into the storyline so that you can associate with these characters. You can put visuals behind the theories.
Okay. What did you ever have a chance to meet Mr. Sitchin?
Yeah, I actually attended his lecture over a decade ago in New York.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. I recently met Von Daniken and Giorgio Tsoukalis. They came to New York for another lecture not too long ago.
Cool. Did you have a chance to speak with Eric?
Is that the person you're talking about? The person who who kind of manages Sitchin's works now, or the website.
No,
Eric Von Daniken.
Yeah.
Oh, Eric. Yeah, I did briefly speak with him. I purchased one of his more recent books, and I hadn't released my book at the time yet. When I was there, I was very close to it. So I corresponded with him and his assistant a little short while after, but he was touring in other parts in Europe, so we kind of lost touch since then.
Okay, was that really a big thrill for you to meet one of your heroes?
I don't know if I'd call him a hero, but definitely a very interesting person. Inspirational to go out there and study these subjects that in some parts of the world would be forbidden. In other parts, they would just call you crazy. But I keep an open mind, and I respect people who try to search for the truth and connect the dots between these ancient civilizations.
Oh,
pretty admirable. We're just in search of the truth, aren't we, Mark?
Yeah, it's not really. I don't think we really have any kind of agenda we're forcing on people.
I want people to think.
Oh yeah. It's not a certain way. Just think.
Think. Period.
Yeah, that's just. I think that's about our only agenda. But yeah, it's. I think each week's just a lot of fun looking at different topics, and this one is no different. Just really great discussion about new ways to look at our history in the world.
Right, and I always encourage people to do their own research. Don't take anything that any of us say as truth. I definitely don't have the absolute truth, and anyone who actually comes out and says that they have the absolute truth is either delusional or lying, because I don't even think that's possible to have an absolute truth. I think there's many layers to existence and to consciousness, and one person's truth is another person's falsity.
So you think mankind just might have developed what we call our soul, and we become uncontrollable by these Anunnaki?
I think that they were experimenting with the genetic structure, and as they were experimenting, not only to create these workers, but to help them understand their own genetics and improve on them, because that's what they were. They were master geneticists, or at least their scientists were. So as they were creating these perfected beings, they reached a point of consciousness where they realized that what they created was not much different than themselves. And at that point, that's where you tie into the story of Adam and Eve and being expelled from the Garden of Eden, when the first humans awoke or realized that they were conscious beings and were able to compete with the Anunnaki in intelligence. The Anunnaki said we can no longer keep them as animals or as laborers. They have to be off on their own, and we have to kind of let them evolve on their own on this planet and create their own cultures. Now,
you mentioned the Garden of Eden, and we all are familiar with the story of Eve biting the apple and the tree of life. I mean, of course, it wasn't an apple. There wasn't apples over there. But the tree of life. And do you think it's possible that fruit was actually contained some kind of virus that was a genetic experiment?
Yeah, I mean, actually, in my book, that's one of the things I depict is a very unique fruit. Now, whether it was a genetic, whether it was a virus or potentially a mind-altering drug that was added into this fruit, or the fruit itself was a mind-altering drug, possibly that would awaken the brain. That's still up to speculation, but there was definitely something to it that took humanity from one level to the next.
Right. We've been joined by Count Crankula, probably pronounced it wrong, even though he's been on air with me hours and hours and hours. How you doing this evening, Count?
I'm doing okay, Painter.
Did I get it right?
Yeah, but okay, was it like a screwed up experiment?
You mean the creation of mankind? Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that there was, just like humanity today, we experiment with genetics. Some people are against it. Some people are for it. There's some groups that want to do good with it, while others may want to use it for their own benefit. The same thing with them. They were experimenting. They were creating these worker beings and gradually improving on them to the point where, they have their own morals, and they realized that they created something that was self-conscious and no longer a farm animal. And they decided to let us go.
Do you think they were using their own DNA plus the DNA of a pre-human that already existed here?
Right. So that's the theory, that they basically used parts of their own DNA to upgrade the existing hominids that naturally evolved on Earth.
That might be where they made their mistake.
I know when I was taking biotechnology, we were all called elites.
And why would that be?
Because, like I've said before, it's, people that work in biotechnology are the ones that create these drugs or, manipulate, all of genetics. And then, see, the pharmaceutical companies, the people that work in pharmaceutical companies, they're nothing more than clerks.
Well, that don't have much to do with Anunnaki, though.
Actually, are you familiar with the drug rapamycin?
No, I am not.
It comes from the soil bacteria at Easter Island, right around surrounding those giant statues that were found buried, more than half buried underground. And this drug is a derivative of this soil bacteria that shows properties of life extension and extended health.
Oh, now that's interesting.
Wow.
That is
Yeah, yeah. It's that seems almost like a Revolution Radio exclusive with information like that. I'm not sure. I don't think I've ever heard anyone discussing that.
I haven't either. Now that one's one I'm going to have to do a little research on. We've talked quite a bit about the statues on Easter Island, and them are pretty unique all on their own. And I'm not sure. Well, they're pretty unique, but I'd never heard anything about the dirt around them, though.
Yeah, they basically discovered this soil that has these properties, and been experimenting with them. And they started off with using it. I believe it was Alzheimer's drug, and then they realized that it had other properties of life extension. When they were experimenting with rodents, it would extend their health and their lifespans, which could also trace back to the Anunnaki and these extended lifespans of the previous age.
Right. When they discovered Easter Island, there was more than one race of people living on it. It wasn't a native tribe, if you know what I mean. It was different colored people.
Mm.
That's kind of interesting. I wonder if it could have been possibly part of Atlantis at one time. Or out there would be Mu.
Right. I mean, imagine the people who experienced this giant Earth calamity, trying to pick up the pieces, just trying to survive. Within a few generations, they would revert back to living off the land and losing much of the knowledge that was there before.
We could end up that way with World War III happening to us.
Yeah, we sure can.
I believe we've made it this far in technology and that, and we have knocked ourselves back. There's 4 or 5 different places in our genome where the breeding population has dropped down to between 15 and 12,000 breeding pairs. And that's happened a few times in our history. And the last time happens to be somewhere around the neighborhood of 12 to 15,000 years ago, from my understanding. That's when they think the deluge was. And it could be as possibly the actual date of the Sumerians, if you know what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, the Sumerians We're basically the first civilization known to pick up the pieces.
Right.
Start recording all this.
Start recording it again. Now how they were recording. I mean, if something happened to us, our recordings would be completely gone for the last 150 years.
Right, because we haven't been putting it on stone or in clay.
Right, we haven't been putting it on stone. Even Mount Rushmore could be a pile of rocks. Oh. We've been joined by Dave from Montana. You have a question for our guest? Dave? You on mute? I guess he's on mute.
All right.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Well, let's just take 870 then while we wait for Dave.
Yeah. I just got asked 2 questions.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. The first one is Church Cassidy, Hessel here a long time ago, right? Well, not so that much long. But anyway, before she split up with Bill Ryan, well, no, it was after she split up with Bill Ryan. And Bill Ryan interviewed this native African chief. Oh, I think it was a chief, I'm not sure. But anyway, he was talking. And, it sounds just like everything that's been said here. They tried to mine the gold, and their own people just said, hey, we ain't going to do this, and so then they tried to take the native people, and to do that, they said, hey, we'll give you speech, because at the time, apparently, the way the story was said is the native people there could communicate each other with thoughts and did not have to speak with their vocal cords, right? And they didn't even know what speaking with vocal cords was, and they came down and they said, "Hey, we'll give you this gift," and they thought that was pretty awesome. And anyway, the second question is there was I don't know where it came from, but a story of the moon was a vessel of people coming to Earth, and the moon was their spaceship coming here, and it was docked in the orbit of Earth, coming here. That's my 2 questions.
Yeah, the first thing you brought up, I'm not sure which African tribe, or if you know that information, that would be very interesting to research that. Yeah, I mean, there are some theories that say that in the prior cycle, or in the ascending part of the cycle, where humanity or the beings that lived on this planet were so advanced that they may have been communicating telepathically and not necessarily through verbal or written language, which could explain why some of these much older structures lack any kind of writing. But yet they had very more advanced architecture and building materials. And they were able to make concrete, but they didn't have any specific writing there. Or some of these giant boxes that they found in the pyramids, they haven't really come up. They said they were tombs, but they really didn't find any skeletons inside of them, or what they are may have been misinterpreted. But they could be containers of some kind of energy or information that we haven't decoded yet. So there's definitely some ancient technologies that we haven't yet discovered that either mankind or previous species used. That we're on a different wavelength now. We use speech, we use sound, and we use writing.
And I'm just kind of wondering if the tones from the sound is what they actually use to move those gigantic megaton blocks of granite to put them in their place. Right.
And there has been scientific efforts recently to use sound and to use tones to levitate objects. They've accomplished it on a smaller level, but it's definitely possible that thousands and thousands of years ago, they were able to do that using sound. And in fact, in the Old Testament, they talk about the Ark of the Covenant as being used in various ways as a weapon, also emanating sound, destroying walls, and all that could be different frequencies of this of sound.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the movie Dune. How I mean, I'm sure you've seen Dune, right?
Mm.
Yeah, it's possible that they use sound waves. I mean, we are a universe based on movement and frequency. Dave, are you there now?
Yeah, could you hear me now?
There we go.
Yep.
Yo, hey, how you doing,
Dave.
Alex?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. My comment and question is about you were talking about Adam and Eve when they ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right?
Right.
I'm thinking it wasn't a tree, kind of, because we all know that there is not a tree that there's of good and not. It's like our mind or something, and we took that we learned how to tie a rock to a stick, and instead of using it to hit a tent peg, they hit it people's heads. We took the knowledge and used it to turn our backs on nature, the way we're supposed to live. Like how a civilization is totally different from what Earth brings forth. And we turn to that instead of the natural way of, gathering and using what the earth provides. You see where I'm coming from?
Yeah,
I'm not thinking it was a fruit, an actual fruit. It was when we decided that we could use our brain to do bad things against the earth and against nature and the natural law of
Right.
existence.
Well, yeah. That's an interesting theory, and it also comes back to this cycle that
of
exists.
The city buildings. They started building cities. That was like they took that knowledge and used it for evil and build a city. Why would they do that when we have everything the earth gives? And they started building the Tower of Babel.
Well, that's because we're a social creature.
But
I'm having trouble growing.
We have to have civilization.
Lemon.
With everything good, there comes bad, and you need both to exist. You need both for existence. You need to be able to compare. It's part of life. It's part of this spiral of the universe. It's for every negative, there's a positive, and that's what keeps the balance. And it also ties to the yin yang belief. But there's actually a scene in 2001: Space Odyssey, in the beginning of that movie, similar to what you're talking about, where they this primitive ape man creates a weapon, or starts using a bone. I think it was a bone as a weapon, and that's when they started to develop further, or started to use evil, but it also, the evil led to escalated evolution, or to accelerated evolution.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, we use the bad to gain what we think is gain, but it's actually destruction of the earth.
Right, but I also think that it's part of it's not only our evolution, but the evolution of the universe. Every being goes through changes, and it's the bad things in life that force a species to adapt and to evolve to the next level. So while none of us want any evil or bad things to happen, it's also I guess it's what they call a necessary evil of the universe. For all these things, like, for example, if there was a major calamity on the planet that forced a large civilization to move to another part of the world, and then now they begin to change because they're now living in a different climate. So these kinds of things push, these kinds of situations push evolution. and they work hand in hand with one another.
Yeah.
I got a question. I'm just kind of wondering, you hear the old story about they talk about Mother Earth and, this, she, like what's going on right now. And they talk about like us as fleas. And when it gets to a certain point, she just like shakes them off,
Mm.
Okay. I talk about that as like in history. And I'm kind of wondering, sorry, could it possibly be that the time that Nibiru comes around and the shaking the fleas, could that be the same thing?
It sure can. I mean, it could also be a point where we begin to reconnect to one another, where our evolution and technological breakthroughs begin to accelerate. And that's what the yugas are all about. That's what the Vedics believed in, that there are cycles that we go through. These cycles include...
kind of like Atlantis. Now they got ascended to a certain point where they're about to destroy the Earth, and it was time to restart, right?
Right, exactly. So we're only beginning to reach the pinnacle. I mean, we're at the beginning stages. We've only had modern technology for 100 years now. Prior to that, mankind lived very similarly for a much longer period of time. And only now what we see is accelerating. I mean, technology, how often are our gadgets changing? How often is everything changing? And although it may look scary to us, or it's something that we can barely keep up with, a generation or two from now, we won't even recognize them, and they may be so much more advanced than us.
Right, and you talk about the acceleration, and it's like the progress, the acceleration, when the way it's like the bell curve, and the more we advance, the quicker we advance, and we're like a straight vertical line right now, and we're already hit that peak. Right.
Well, it's relative, right? So that peak could be, 100 or even 1,000 years from now.
that is true now. Yeah. Shoot, I'll tell you what. This has been a pretty interesting conversation, and Lady.
We had 3 callers too.
Yeah, Lady Horse had a good little comment I thought was good. There is nothing either good or bad except things that make it so, by Shakespeare. And that's pretty much what you were saying there, Alex. Without these little hurdles to overcome, we wouldn't advance.
We wouldn't advance, and we also, when you look around the world around you, if you're trying to be a good person, but you see all these evils in the world, it gives you a perspective. It teaches you how not to be. So you learn lessons from other people's mistakes, and that's also part of our evolution.
I believe that we are in a dualistical universe, or reality. Now, not necessarily the whole universe, but our reality here that we have manifested is dual. Without the good or without the evil, we have nothing to measure the good against.
I kind of wonder if that exactly might be what we're seeing today. People are like really ascending now, right? I mean, people are just like really know what's going on and starting to understand about love, right?
Mm-hmm.
Love. I mean, just there's nothing like it, right? But there's a balance. So maybe that's why we see so much really bad stuff going on. I mean, people doing some things that are so horrific. We just, it blows our mind when we see how bad it is. But maybe that's because there's so much good going on, and there's bad going on, and it's what it really is the balance of the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and at some point, when it hits a critical mass, it can begin to blend, and the evil becomes less, and we begin to ascend together, or the ones that are involved in the evil realize or awaken, because there's enough of the good that's now at the tipping point.
Well,
and then it starts all over again.
Yeah, I kind of also wonder, but they talk about you can call it ascension. Or in the Bible, it's all the same. There's many different religions, but if you get back and step a few feet back and look at them all, they're basically all saying the same message.
Almost all of them can be traced back to the ancient Sumerians.
Right.
What I'm saying is, it's kind of like the. I'm not sure what you would say, but it's like can't remember her name, but Carrie Cassidy did an interview with her. She lived in Florida, I believe, and she talked about it's basically like it's almost like a phase shift, and where the Earth, like everything splits, and people. It's like basically they talked about in the Bible, when people ascend and go to heaven, and people stay in hell. It's basically the same thing, like the good people just kind of like shift into one direction or the other.
Right, and I would equate it to, I wouldn't even say the good people, I would say the consciousness that inhabits the people changes phases or frequencies to experience these different things. So if you master the frequencies, you can kind of stay on that positive frequency and go through the world, go through life, having these positive experiences, while others around you are not necessarily having that same experience, only because you've switched that frequency and you're able to stay in tune with that frequency.
Do you think there are parallel universes running alongside us?
Yeah, I actually do. I think that I subscribe to the multiverse theory. I believe that for every possibility, there's a separate universe that branches off, just like a tree. And then basically our consciousness is what navigates through the multiverse, choosing those directions, choosing the various branches.
I believe that's what they talk about when they talk about the tree of life. Myself, I think it's this branching of dimensions.
Right, and like I said, the frequency is really the path that you choose. It's almost like a worm digging through the ground, and it can go in any direction, up, down, left, right, and everything in between. Same thing with us and the choices we make in our lives. And the only free choice we really have is to awaken and to basically be in tune with the universe and assist the force of creation, or to resist it. And the more we resist it, the more trouble we run into.
I like that you call it the force of creation. Go ahead.
That's something I kind of wonder about. You have a choice to go this way or that way, and they talk about the rapture and all that. It just really makes me wonder about Nibiru coming around every so many thousands of years, and I just really kind of wonder if that is like a window that comes around.
Well, one thing you can be sure of is something happened to our solar system at one time or another. You can look at it and see something happen.
Right, and I believe that happens every so often. And I kind of wonder if that every point of time, every so often, that one time in several thousands of years, if it comes around and everyone's been given a choice to go one direction or the other, and every so many thousands of years, like Nibiru comes around, and is that window of opportunity to go to the good and ascend, or stay here and learn again? That's my wonder.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see it from that point of view. But I like to equate. I mean, those are our individual aspects, right? Our individual lives and our individual souls, if you want to call it that. But I like to also think about it as the bigger picture. And like I mentioned, the force of creation. Some people call it God. There's many different terms for it. But the way I see it is the force of creation. All it wants to do is create. All it can do is create. And by creating, it has to experience the good and the bad. It has to have all these experiences. It also, because it's not bound by time, it can experiment and say, okay, I tried that path out. I'm going to backtrack and try this other path out. So the multiverse is really every possible combination that could be of creation. So every manifestation of beings, every choice that individuals make, every choice that cultures make, and everything that branches out from those directions. It's almost like if you were producing free will, but let's say you're the producer of a television show, you're also the viewer, and you're also the television.
Whatever works.
Right.
I got to get off of here. My little puppy dogs are getting kind of wild. I would just like to say one last thing. I would like to give Thomas a really, really big thank you for the past times that he always, way back before the studio got really big, and Thomas played Painted Black for me, and I really thank you, Thomas.
I'll do it again next Saturday if you remind me.
I thank you all those times you played that song, Thomas.
No problem.
Okay, bye.
Well, that was some interesting questions. Let's get back to your book.
Sure.
Give everybody your website again. We got about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we get it out there one more time at least.
Sure. So just to give everybody a summary, if they didn't hear the first part of the interview, the book is a graphic novel, which is an illustrated storyline putting together the theories of the ancient astronauts, the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were described as gods by the Sumerians. The Sumerians were the first known civilization that basically invented the wheel, introduced advanced mathematics and astronomy, accounting, and so on, and they were the first civilization that we've discovered that had writing. So my book, In the Beginning, the Epic of the Anunnaki, puts all that together into a storyline, ties it to the stories from the book of Genesis, and introduces us to our creators, our origins, and a little bit of conspiracy in there as well. The book can be purchased at inthebeginningthebook.com. That's www.inthebeginningthebook.com. You can also search for In the Beginning, the Epic of the Anunnaki on Amazon.
Alex, do you get people saying that what you're writing is heretical, or do you find that what you're doing is actually enriching someone's faith by making them look deeper into what their belief system is?
It's the more I research this subject, the more it actually leads to spirituality, and being a good person, and being in awe of life and creation. So I've actually written an article not too long ago for one of the more popular blogs, that it doesn't negate the idea of God, or of a force of creation, or the ultimate consciousness of the universe. One doesn't negate the other. A God could still exist and puts things in motion, including the Anunnaki, who then created mankind, and it's all part of that plan. It's all part of this universe.
Right.
So I don't think one negates the other. Surprisingly, I'm part of a lot of other Facebook groups and pages, and I do see a lot of arguing and even some very negative comments and fights that break out online. And I haven't experienced that for some reason. I have a very good audience from all around the world, from pretty much every developed country.
You're a good soul, and it projects outwards.
Thank you.
You are, and people can tell when they hear you. And I think that's part of the awakening that is happening. We're getting back some of these traits that we used to have, like the caller was talking about us being able to communicate telepathically. I believe we were able to do that back then, and it's some of them genes that were shut off, and that they call junk DNA now.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. I mean, and hopefully we'll be back. We'll be going back in that direction soon. So
I think that's what's happening. That we are.
I also thought.
I still think that we still communicate the same way.
Well, I'm saying the ability's there. It's just been turned off. We just don't know. We're just now learning to turn it back on.
Because it's almost like reading somebody's mind.
Yeah, I actually heard someone mention that. When they say in the Tower of Babel, when everybody spoke one language, it may have not been a language altogether. And
right, it might not have been verbal.
Right.
I know people that can speak Russian, and I can actually know exactly what they're thinking.
Actually, I speak Russian as well.
Well, and I can understand exactly what they're saying, even though I don't understand their language. I can do that.
Interesting.
It's amazing.
I think they got a name for that, but I'm sure it's hard to pronounce. We only got a couple minutes left, Alex. I have really enjoyed this conversation, and even without asking Mark, I'm going to ask you to come back sometime soon, because I think this is a pretty intriguing subject myself.
Oh, I'm not going to object to Alex coming back.
If I thought you would, I wouldn't have asked.
There's only one guest I've banned from the show. Everyone else is welcome to come back anytime.
We're not going to say who that is.
You'll let me know offline. I'm curious.
That wouldn't be politically correct.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you having me, and this has definitely been a very interesting and amazing conversation. I'd look forward to coming back again. We've only scratched the surface of the subject, and like I said, the more people research this subject, the more it exposes, it shows that how connected everything is, and history and science and astronomy, and there is no boundaries. Everything is all our boundaries and walls are imaginary.
Yeah, that's true. They're definitely imaginary. I'm going to put a link in the chat room to a online database of the Sumerian Texas. You can go look at them yourself and actually search through them, and what do you call it?
Read the translations.
Yeah, there you go, the translations. I was thinking of decoding and know that wasn't right. But some of it's pretty interesting reading. I suggest y'all go check it out, and go check out Alex's book. And Mark, I'm glad you are here, and thank you. And Count, thank you. Have a good evening.
Great show.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
A little stumble there at the end, huh?